Hi, everyone. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas. And I am very excited tonight to be hosting another virtual event. And we have two of my favorite ladies joining us. We have Rhys Bowen and Deborah Crombie. Now, I haven't done a virtual event probably in 6 weeks at least, maybe longer. We've been back to in-store events mostly. So if I'm a little rusty on this, forgive me. I do know that we have signed book plates for the brand new book by Rhys Bowen, Peril in Paris. And as always, we generally host Deborah Crombie for her new books, and she'll have one coming out in February. So I've got a link in the comments with information about both authors and those books that we will hear all about tonight. So for now, though, get started thinking about questions. We will have a question portion for the last 20 minutes or so of the event, and I will come back on to moderate those about 35 or 40 minutes in. So don't be shy. No such thing as a dumb question, and we'll have a good time. So Rhys Bowen is joining us. Hi, Rhys. How are you?
Hi, McKenna. You look fabulous.
Oh, thank you. As do you. It's so good to see you, albeit virtually, maybe next time in person.
Yeah, let's hope so. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to get out there again, really.
We're happy to host you whenever that happens. Now, as always, you know, I'm a big fan of the Lady Georgie books, and we have her back in Paris in this one. So, which I can't believe is number 16. I've been reading since the beginning. Yeah. But a lot has happened over the years with Lady Georgie, and I'm always happy to see her back. Let me do your quick little bio, and we'll get Deborah Crombie out here with us as well. Rhys Bowen, a New York Times bestselling author, has been nominated for every major award in mystery writing, including the Edgar, and has won many, including both the Agatha and Anthony awards. She's the author of the Molly Murphy series, set in turn of century New York, the Constable Evans Mysteries, set in Wales, many international standalone novels, and as I already mentioned, this Lady Georgie series. She was born in England and now divides her time between Northern California and Arizona. Thanks again for being here.
Oh, thank you.
We also have another Anglophile here. We have Deborah Crombie. How are you?
I'm great. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Deborah Crombie is a New York Times bestselling author and native Texan who has lived in both England and Scotland. She now lives in McKinney, Texas, sharing a house that's more than 100 years old with her husband, 3 cats, and 2 German shepherds. And as I already mentioned, you will have a new book coming out in February. We are all eagerly anticipating it as big fans. It's a new Duncan Kincaid and Gemma James. So hopefully later we'll hear a bit about that as well. Thanks for being here to host or to interview Rhys tonight. And I'm going to leave you to it. Have fun.
Thank you, McKenna. Bye. See you in a minute. Yeah.
We can chat. We can chat all night.
Well, you and I can chat all night.
So good to see you, Rhys.
Thank you. I am so impressed that you said you'd do this.
You were just
you got off the plane, right?
We're freezing. Yeah, I was in London for 3 weeks, and I just got back on Monday night. So I'm kind of scrambling and trying to find my feet. So you were in Paris, you were in Cornwall, and then Paris, and then London. How long was your trip?
Almost a month. Yeah, this is like you. This is my first travel in 3 years, and it was interesting because I'm interested to know from you if you found this too. Because you hadn't been in so long, you noticed really little things like, oh, well, that's what it's like in London, and that's what it's like in Paris. Well, for me, the big thing in London was I arrived an hour before the Queen died. So I got to...
Oh, I remember.
I got to experience that whole thing with everybody coming to Buckingham Palace with the flowers, and then the bells all tolling. You know, everywhere you went in London, you heard this slow boom, boom, really eerie. And then the shops had draped their windows in black and had like tributes to Her Majesty outside. And quite a few of the smaller shops said, we will be closed for the period of mourning. And I thought that's 10 days. That really is, that just shows how incredibly respected she was everywhere. I mean, everybody in London was sort of saying, I can't believe it. Can you, God, put Her Majesty. And I got, because I write this series about the royal family, I got all these messages saying, I am so sorry to hear of your loss. Like, well, it's not exactly my loss, it's everybody's loss.
Yeah.
But I think my answer was, I am really happy for this, because she died on her own terms. She was completely sharp still. The day before she died, she met the new prime minister.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was working till the very end. She was up in Balmoral that she loved. She had her son and daughter up there, and she didn't die hooked up to things in a hospital or something. She went on her own terms, and I'm sure she really missed Philip. I think she's been very lonely, because not only did he die, but during COVID she was shut there alone at Windsor. And I think if she was ready to go, so I was happy for her that she went at the right time.
I think it couldn't. I mean, but it was still a shock. I mean, we all knew that she was going to go at some point. She couldn't live forever, but somehow you just weren't quite prepared.
Yeah, Barbara Peters said the other night, I was sure she was going to make 100, because she likes nice, tidy numbers.
Well, there were still little commemorations everywhere.
Yeah.
And really, King Charles was not in the news much while I was there. But I got to see live, because I happened to be in the flat that day. I got to see the resignation of the prime minister. I had been having problems with my TV, and where it wouldn't turn on reliably, so I had left it on with the sound muted. And I don't normally have the television on during the day, especially when I'm in London, but I had it on that day. And then I was working, and I happened to look up when the noon news came on BBC One, and I saw them bring the podium out from number 10 Downing Street. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be history making here. So I turned it on, and I was riveted for about 3 hours. It was such an experience to be there during all the commotion and be experiencing it. But of course, I thought about you arriving in London the day.
Yeah, I watched the funeral live. Unfortunately, we'd already left for Paris the day before, but I sat in my hotel room rather than going out in Paris, and I watched the whole funeral.
Yeah,
I thought I have to see that.
And you were in the same time, which made it seem more immediate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were lucky that we left the day before the funeral, because I gather that the day of the funeral, you probably couldn't have got around London. Every street was blocked off, and it was crazy. So we went on the Sunday, and the funeral was the Monday.
I did go to Buckingham Palace. I hadn't actually been to Buckingham Palace. I mean, even to we've driven by in a cab or on a bus, but I did walk and took a lot of pictures. And I walked to Clarence House, because apparently the king is not going to live in Buckingham Palace. He's going to stay in Clarence House. And I just I wanted to have that physical idea of what that looked like. So that was interesting. And I saw a carriage turn into the Royal Mews as I walked by, but there was nobody in it.
Okay. Yeah. Have you never been to the changing of the guard?
I have, but I hadn't done it for years.
Yeah. Well, I've been in London a couple of times in the summer, and that's when you can actually do the tour of Buckingham Palace. You can go through all the rooms and everything. I've done that.
I did that with Barbara Peters and another friend when they first started opening Buckingham Palace for tours. And it was a beautiful August day, and we did the tour, and then we had tea at the Ritz.
Yeah. Well,
so that was a memorable occasion.
Yeah, I remember when I did it, of course, I was, I did it with an eye to Georgie often goes to have tea. We used to go and have tea with Queen Mary at Buckingham Palace. So everywhere I walked, I thought, now, what could Georgie knock over here? Or what could she worry about? Well, there was one hallway with an enormous vase in it. I mean, Chinese. And I thought, oh, God, that would have gone. She would have tripped into that, I'm sure.
So let's talk about Georgie. First of all, let's talk about 50 books, which I just think is absolutely fabulous. What an accomplishment.
Well, I'm really glad this is my 50th book, because that, it makes it very special, because obviously the Royal Spiness series has a great sort of spot in my heart, because it really was the series that sort of, I won't say put me on the map, but it sort of got the biggest fan base. And also it's something that I love to write. So it's kind of fun that book number 50 is actually Royal Spiness number 16. So I'm thrilled about that, yeah.
And it's so much fun. I had a NetGalley, but in the flat in London, my Kindle wouldn't connect with the flat Wi-Fi for some reason, so I couldn't download it. So the first thing I did when I got home was I downloaded the book, and that's what I did recovering from jet lag. I literally read it in one sitting.
Well,
it was so much fun.
I was going to say, I hope that's because you loved it and it wasn't because it was so trite that you just skipped through it, like, oh, done that one.
No, it was so much fun. And in every Georgie book, it feels like meeting a friend that you just haven't seen in a little bit and catching up, because the voice is so natural and so engaging. And then, of course, Paris and Coco Chanel, and just really a fabulous adventure.
Well, I felt we've leapt ahead, and I hope we'll try not to do too many spoilers, because if you're only on book 3, this might come as a shock to you. But Georgie, we found out at the end of the last book, which took place at Sandringham, at the royal house at Sandringham, at the time when King George V is dying. And we find out at the end of that book, the king has died, and that Georgie's cousin, the Prince of Wales, has become King Edward VIII. And then we also find out that Georgie, who hasn't been feeling very well, turns out that she's pregnant. So both of those things were like a shock at the end of the last book. So we had to pick up from there. So poor Georgie hasn't been having a very easy time. She's had horrible morning sickness. And now things are getting a little bit better. It's springtime. She's feeling a little more hopeful. And then she gets to be a bit bored, stuck in her nice house, but Darcy usually off doing things. And so when he says to her, look, I have to go to Paris, would you like to come along? That sounds like a really good idea at the time. If she'd thought about it more, perhaps she might have minded.
This is 1936, and I had to go back and look at the dates of her Royal Spiness was set in 1932. And it's such a fascinating period in between the wars. And so what inspired you with the first Georgie book to choose that period?
Well, I wanted to write about someone who was royal but penniless, and then obviously it has to be in a time period where she can go out unchaperoned, and where society's rules are not too strict, so that she can actually go and solve some crimes. But also, what a fascinating period that is. It's poised between 2 world wars, and you would have thought the First War, the Great War, as they called it, would have changed everything. But it didn't. People came back and they went back to their jobs as things like servants and, farm laborers, servants. In fact, in the 1930 census, the biggest occupational category was still domestic servant. So people came back to be servants. So you have this real dichotomy of people being servants, etc., and then hope for a new world. And the other thing too is, if you look at the politics, you have Europe on a knife edge the whole time between communism and the Russian Revolution and fascism. And luckily, England toyed with both of those. But the British are sensible people. They didn't go with either of them. They shoved out both extremes. But then these books, of course, it's funny because the books are supposed to be light and funny, but we've had this growing sense of what might be happening in Europe. And with each of the books, we've seen a little more of Hitler coming to power. And to start with, nobody takes him seriously. The people in England say, oh, that funny little man with his moustache. Yeah. And now we are taking him seriously. And as we find out in this book, we should be taking him seriously. I think it's quite of a shock to Georgie when her mother, who is, we find out, is living in Germany with this very rich German industrialist. And she adores Max spoiling her and all that lovely money. But she's now on a shopping spree to Paris, and she has a minder. She has a woman who watches wherever she is. And then you suddenly think, this is how it's becoming. So I think we've got the undercurrent of true politics going on in this book more than we have in any of the others.
I think there was some sense of it, at least in the last book, with the death of the king, and of course we've had Wallace Simpson floating around the edges of the stories for quite a while, and if it's not too big of a spoiler, we do get to see Wallace in this book. The king, as he was at this time, he sort of toyed a bit with Nazi sympathies, I think.
Oh, I think he was. The whole thing with Edward, Georgie calls him David because that's what the family always called him. He's a lightweight. He's a true Peter Pan. He wants to have fun. He wants to be with his friends, drinking and laughing and talking. He doesn't want to be a king. He doesn't want to do any of that. I think he's very easily influenced. You can tell that from the fact that Wallace was able to seduce him easily. And he's quite enamored with what they're achieving in Germany. And obviously, at this stage, if you look, there were some things they were achieving. Hitler got everybody back to work, and they built the Autobahn, and they did a lot of good things industrially. But only a very naive person would see the things that were happening that were not good. And no, he was quite enamored with Hitler. In fact, I have a picture after he abdicated. Lips won't work. Abdicated. After he abdicated, he and Wallace went to visit Hitler at Hitler's little nest in the mountains. And there is a picture of Wallace holding out her hand like this with a rapt expression as Hitler kisses her hand. And I thought, thank God he abdicated. Well, that's what Winston Churchill said. We should build a statue to Mrs. Simpson, because if it weren't for her, we would all be German puppets by now. Yeah. So
so frightening. It's so frightening to look at in retrospect. When did Edward abdicate?
Towards the end of the year I'm writing about, 1936.
In 1936.
The interesting thing, if we're doing a game with real history, is that the British public still knew nothing of Wallace Simpson, because the whole press corps in England had a gentleman's agreement not to mention her. If you went over to the continent or you went to America, there would be the great sensational pieces about her, Wallace Simpson spotted with the king skiing in Davos, that sort of thing. Yeah. But in England, nobody knows in England. So it's going to come as a huge shock when the king announces later on in the year that he wants to marry Mrs. Simpson. And of course, the prime minister has to say, no, this can't happen. You cannot marry a twice divorced woman. And then, of course, the Church of England says, you are the head of the church. The church does not recognize divorce. She is twice divorced. You can't marry her. And the interesting thing to me, obviously I did a lot, I only knew what everybody else knew before, but during the series I've done a lot of research. She came across as this clever, calculating woman, but she was naive enough to believe that she could be queen. That's what she wanted.
Yeah.
She wanted to be queen. And in this book, which you've just read, she says to Georgie's mother at one stage, "You'll be curtsying to me soon." She really thinks that when he's king, he can sort of somehow wave a hand and say, "By royal decree, I now say that you can be queen and I can marry you." That wasn't how it worked at all. And she, as someone said at the thing I did at Poison Pen 2 days ago, she got what she deserved. She got him for life.
So, well, it's just fascinating, but let's talk about Georgie and Darcy. I was thinking, looking back over the series, when we don't, most of us, when we start writing a series, have any idea where or how it will end up. But it's been such a journey for them in 4 years, because from 1932.
Yeah.
And you've done the will they, won't they? Did you worry that readers would be disappointed when you married them off?
Well, that's one of the problems, isn't it? I mean, you had exactly the same thing with Duncan and Gemma. Did you intend eventually that they'd get together?
No, not in the beginning. I had no idea.
Well, I didn't even know about Darcy to start with. I wanted Georgie, who was very sheltered and naive at the beginning of this series. I wanted her to have an encounter with a bad boy. And so we have Darcy, who quite clearly doesn't abide by the normal rules. And at the beginning has made a bet, as we find out with her friend Belinda, that he can get her into bed within a week. So we know he's a bad boy to start with. And we gradually learn as the books go along. I mean, Georgie can't believe that this really devastatingly handsome and slightly wicked young man can be at all interested in her. And perhaps he's not to start with. Perhaps it's just a challenge because she's so pure and virginal, But then as they go along, they are more and more attracted to each other. And then, of course, about 3 or 4 books ago, they end up marrying. And that's the problem with the will they, won't they. They've got I love that, in any series, the moonlighting, all of those, they're really exciting, but you can't string it out forever because, in the end you start to say, "Oh, for Pete's sake, go to bed and stop it," eventually they had to marry. With 16 books, you can't go.
It gets tiresome. I think if people don't do, what people would do in real life, it gets tiresome.
And also she's had to learn to trust herself and to be confident enough to say, yes, he does love me, and I don't have to worry if he's seen with another woman because, I can trust him. And that's a huge step for her. She's made some missteps along the way. I know when she was in Nice, she saw him on the beach with a woman and a small child, and she really thinks it's a family he hasn't told her about. And of course, it's his sister and his nephew. So she's come to be comfortable with him now. But of course, the other thing is she still doesn't really know what he does to earn any money. He has this strange and secretive and hush-hush job in which he sometimes is asked to do things maybe for the government. And that might be the case in this book, where we do learn a little bit more about what he does.
Yeah.
And we can't tell you now, else you won't want to read the book.
But she does question it a bit in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I think she's always, she wants to trust him, but she overhears something in this book which makes her think, my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? And so, poor Georgie, she can never really be incredibly happy and everything. She's always got, what are you doing now? Is it dangerous? And, she's met him on occasions before when they were down in Cornwall, where he's undercover and she just happens to bump into him and he's playing at being somebody else. And, so she can never have a lovely vacation with him in which they don't have to worry. Remember her honeymoon? he says, I'm
Yeah.
going to take you to Kenya on honeymoon. Well, fantastic. And then she gets there, and the first thing someone says to him is, thank God you've come. I'm like, oh, is this supposed to be a honeymoon or what? So, yeah. Well, they say, don't you, that if
we
you love...
we wouldn't want him to lead a totally quiet life.
No.
So tell us a little bit about Peril in Paris, about the things that aren't spoilers. So she's going to visit Belinda, who is now living in Paris.
Well, Belinda, we've always known Belinda has a great flair for fashion and for fashion design, and has actually apprenticed herself to Coco Chanel. And so she's working with Chanel, and they're all in a frantic hurry because it's going to be the fall collection, which comes out in the spring. And so they're all putting the final touches to it. And Georgie lets on that she can't come, she has nothing to wear. So Coco sort of says, oh, we'll design something for you and you can model it. How seldom do I have the chance to design something for a pregnant woman? So poor Georgie's like, no, I'm not coming, I'm not modeling, please don't ask me. But Coco gets her own way. So a lot of the book takes place at this fashion show, but we have other things. We have other things in the book which link to Paris of the time. I think we go to Gertrude Stein's salon, and
that was wonderful.
Yeah, Ernest Hemingway just happens to be there because he's passing through Paris on his way down to Spain. So we catch him just at that moment when he's going to Spain, and we get to see a group of. This is something I've always envied, and in fact, I was in Paris 3 or 4 weeks ago. And you don't have that anymore, where you have a group of expat writers and artists and things all sitting together at a cafe, all talking passionately about art. And that even when you and I get together with our friends, we don't sit there and say, well, I'm striving in this next book to create an aura of, we sort of say, I found this great place to eat around the corner. But
of course, they probably did more of that than history remembers.
Could be, yeah. They didn't have the money to eat. We do, that's the difference.
Yeah. But I love the description of Gertrude Stein's salon and the food and this, and it's Paris in April.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So,
it was vicarious.
It was the atmosphere.
I was writing it during the pandemic when I couldn't travel. So, to be able to write about Paris in April and think, oh, what would I be seeing now? There'll be blossom and those lovely trees and the parks, all the things which I was there, as I say, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and just noticing all the little things in Paris that are so wonderful, not just the gorgeous buildings and the lovely parks, but those little cafes, where you can just sit outside with a cup of coffee and all the tiny. We stayed in the Marais, which I love. All those tiny little shops everywhere. You think, how can there be a shop that just sells ribbon? How often does someone say, oh my God, I need ribbon today, and rush to that shop? It doesn't happen very much. But they all seem to be able to survive. And it's a fantastic place. It's just very, very unique, I think.
Made me want to go to Paris. I haven't been to Paris in much too long. So, but it was nice to have a virtual, a vicarious trip to Paris.
Thank you. Yeah. So what did you notice in London this time that, because you hadn't been to so long, what made you think, oh, yes, I'm back in London?
Oh, gosh. Just everything. Dogs. Children, so many children and so many dogs. And it always makes me laugh when you mentioned this the other day about the Parisians are not good about cleaning up after their dogs, and the English are.
Yeah. Well, and the Parisians. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, the English would tell you off.
Yeah.
Somebody would stop you in the street and say, you take care of that. The people in the department stores with their little dogs, and in the restaurants and the cafes. And I think that's something that we tend to forget when we're not there, how
Yeah.
dog friendly the English are.
Yeah. I mean, when we were down in Cornwall, if you go into a pub, there are about 20 dogs sitting under the tables. And the interesting thing with English dogs is they never fight each other. You know, there's none of these sort of growling, snarling. The dogs trot in with their owners. They flop down under the table, and the owners go up for a pint, and the dog sits there. And they're very well behaved. And in Paris, I love it that there's so many men who carry their little dogs like this in one hand, like, you know, oh, bonjour, and you've got the little dog sitting there like that. It's so Parisian to see men walking around with a dog tucked under one arm, isn't it?
Well, and London is now, the cafe society is not quite as pronounced as I think it was during the latter part of the pandemic, because not all of the restaurants are serving outside now, but everywhere there's street cafes. And of course the weather was fine, so people were eating outside. And I don't know, I think maybe London feels a little more continental than it did before the pandemic.
Yeah. One thing I noticed in London was how very few, one might say, sort of English people, native English people, are working. Almost everywhere you go, every single person who works is an immigrant. Did you find that? You know, in our hotel, I don't think there was one single, they were from Poland, Romania, everywhere, except from England. And you think, well, what exactly are the English people doing at the moment?
Not working in central London.
No, that's true.
But it was my last Saturday there. I went to Portobello Market, because I usually do I try to do that on Saturday, and everybody was French.
Ah, interesting. Did you go to our? Did you go to our favorite pub? Yeah.
In Portobello.
Yeah. You know that pub in Portobello where they do good fish and chips? There's one halfway down the Portobello. I forget what it's called, but I know you've been there before, and I tend to go there sometimes. Yeah. It's about halfway up the Portobello Road on the right, and it's a pub with like the very old booths, and
the Duke of Wellington.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, could be. Yeah, and they do very good fish and chips.
That's my Saturday ritual, is to just to go all the way up the market to the very last bit, and then walk back and stop and have a glass of wine at the Duke of Wellington. I like to watch the market close down. And but it was wonderful. It was wonderful to be there. I was homesick, but I'm never quite ready to come home. No. So when will you get back?
I'm hoping to go probably next June, I think. What the very sad thing that happened, or didn't happen this time, was I had arranged to meet some college friends in London. What I'd said was, I'm going to be at our club in London, and if anyone likes to come up, I will treat you to lunch. And I thought, I knew a couple of them were in commute distance of London. It turned out 10 of them were going to come. That one was coming from Wales, 2 were coming from Yorkshire, and 1 was flying in from Shetland. So I had all these lovely college friends coming in.
So disappointing.
And so 2 days before that, I had to call them and say it's all cancelled, because I hoped for, I wasn't feeling bad. I thought if I wore a mask, I could sit far enough away from them and chat, and maybe not join them eating, but sit and chat while they ate. And then the hotel said, you cannot leave your room. So there I was, a prisoner in my room, and I had to cancel. So we've had to have a Zoom meet. We're going to have Zoom meetings once a month now. Yeah. And so I hope we're going to, normally we meet every 2 months somewhere lovely. And so I think next June, we're going to try and do it in the Cotswolds, which will be really nice.
You'll have to go to Lower Slaughter.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite. Yeah, Lower Slaughter and Bourton on the Water. I love them all those villages. They're fabulous. So we want to go there, and then we also obviously we'll go down to Cornwall and see John's sister and all the family, which is fabulous. And then John's. We've never been to Jersey. Have you been to Jersey? So John said we really should.
No, I never have.
So we might do that next year. So that's sort of very tentative at the moment. Who knows? You can't plan ahead at the moment, having learned each time. And we're going on a cruise in February, and it's a cruise we've cancelled now 3 times because each time we were about to go, and then, no, we can't go on a cruise now. So finally next February, we hope. And then, who knows what's going to happen in May. It's just, you take it one step at a time at the moment.
So can you even give us a hint what you have in mind for Georgie? Are you writing the next book or the next Georgie? Where does that fall in your schedule?
I've started the next Georgie now, yeah. What Georgie, while she's in Paris, meets a young man who's a chef, and she persuades him to come back to London. So in the next book, the chef does arrive, and I can't tell you whether he's good or not, but there's going to be she has a neighbor who's a very famous writer, who is who writes the sort of I won't say horror books, but maybe very dark books,
and gothic.
Yeah, very gothic. Yeah, and sort of maybe mysteries with a touch of the supernatural in. And he's very popular, and he has just bought a manor, and the manor has a poison garden. And so he's going to have an open house at the poison garden, and bad things are going to happen. That's all I can tell you.
Of course.
Yeah. But it's called, I do have a title. It's called The Proof of the Pudding. So,
well, if you're going to have a poison garden, will it be spring and garden season?
It will be July. So it will be perfect season to have all sorts of fruits that he's grown and things to eat that could kill you. It's wonderful.
Oh, I made it to the Chelsea Physic Garden, which has been on my to-do list for ages. And I don't think I was prepared really for how beautiful it was. And also, I walked right by the grounds of the Chelsea Flower Show, and that was really fun.
Yeah.
Did
you have lunch at the Physic Garden? Because I
did. It was a beautiful sunny day, and I ate on the patio, the cafe, and what did I have? A smoked duck breast salad and a glass of rosé, and it was absolutely glorious. I would have sat there all afternoon. I had a meeting and I had to leave, but it was wonderful.
Yeah. Well, their food is amazing there, and the person in charge of their food. When we had one of our college reunions, she came and did the catering for us, and it was absolutely amazing. One of my college friends is a docent there. If I'd known, I could have put her in touch with you. And so she was the one who got, I forget what her name is. Oh, Lynette. Her name is Lynette, to come and do the catering for us. But every time I go there, in fact, sometimes I meet Louise there because she lives close, and we love to have lunch there. So we go in and have lunch, and the food's fantastic.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Maybe I'll manage to get it in a book.
It's funny because a lot of my travel, it's all about food. I'm not normally at home. I don't have a huge appetite. I'm not a huge eater, but when I'm away, I've got to go through all the rituals of the comfort foods. When we're in Cornwall, we have to have a pasty, or we had a pasty every day this time. We have to have a cream tea. We have to stop somewhere for fish and chips. It's all the things that one. And of course, we have at the club. They do the hugest full English breakfast you've ever seen. So I have to have all those things. And then in Paris, we have to have a pain au chocolat every day. And the best was we had my birthday while we were on a cruise up the Seine, and I was with my daughter and son-in-law as well as my husband, and they texted me. They were out for a hike, and they said, "Which pastries do you like?" And I said, doesn't matter. I like them all. So they came back with this box of a dozen tiny pastries this size. And they were just works of art. Each one was a tiny little raspberry tart or a little meringue covered in chocolate. I mean, just each one. And a dozen pastries was €10. So, that was one thing. France was, for food, is amazingly cheap. When you buy their fruit and vegetables, they look like they were picked 10 minutes ago, and they're really cheap too. So the French like to eat well, which is great.
Yeah. Well, London was really, really expensive, but the exchange rate helped. I had afternoon tea four times. I think I set a record on number of afternoon teas. And it was
Where did you have them?
Okay, no more. Well, I think McKenna is going to come back and see if we have any questions.
I do have a question, which was the one that Rhys just asked. Where did you have your teas?
Let's see. The first one, actually, my daughter was there for the first 5 days, and it was so hectic. She had every meal scheduled for 5 days, but she wanted to have tea at the Shard, and which is not something that I would have thought about doing. And I can't say that the food was fabulous, but it was good. But the view was just absolutely amazing. It was really an experience that I was glad I did.
Yeah. My mom and I go every year.
So then the Wolsey, which was great. Actually, I think that was the best and the least expensive of all the places that I had tea. And where else? I did there was a Beatrix Potter exhibition at the V&A, and a hotel that I stayed in before, number 16 Sumner Place, which is a Ferndale hotel, and I'm on their mailing list. And like a week before I was leaving, I got an email saying they were having an afternoon tea, and the curator from the Beatrix Potter exhibition was going to be the speaker. So I booked that, and that was wonderful. I had to buy the book from the exhibition too. I knew it meant I was going to have to either check a second bag or ship books home, but it was so wonderful. And this is on until January, I think, at least January. So if anybody is going to London, don't miss it.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things I was planning to do during my last 4 days in London, when I was locked in my hotel. Yeah, the V&A, yeah, because I adore Beatrix Potter. I've been to her cottage up in the Lake District and everything, and that would have been lovely. Instead of that, I was looking out at a wall for 4 days, but never mind.
That was so disappointing.
I know, yeah, it was, but I survived. I mean, the good news was that I wasn't sick. That was the.
And John didn't get sick, did he?
John had no symptoms at all. Really annoyingly, healthy. He kept coming back every day. He'd go out and bring me my next meal, and then the hotel delivered my dinner, but he had to bring me sandwiches and things for lunch, and also had to bring my breakfast. So he would go out, do his fun things, and then come back and give me the next meal. It was like, just like a prisoner.
Well, knock wood. I don't want to jinx myself, but I got through 3 weeks with.
Yeah, because you didn't see anybody with a mask on, did you?
Some, but all the cafes and the pubs and the bars, everything was packed. And I would occasionally and see people on public transport a few people wearing masks, and I did on the tube and the bus. I think maybe that was kind of silly since I was going in restaurants and pubs, but it couldn't hurt.
Yeah, well, that was, you see, that was annoying for me because I was the one who wore my mask on all public transportation. You know, I'd be sitting on, or we went on the Eurostar. I'm sitting in the carriage and nobody else has a mask on, and I do. And but the big problem was we did go to some restaurants, and even though we took a table far from other people, you don't know how the air circulates. So, and everybody in Paris was coughing. I mean, you walk down the street and people are going past you, going everywhere. And so I tested in Paris and I tested negative. So I went into the pharmacy and I said, you know, I've got this cough. And she said, oh, everybody has a cold right now. So I felt that's what I had. And it wasn't until we got back to London several days later, and we were going to see family members who had young kids. And I said to John, well, perhaps I ought to just test again. And this time it was positive. So, you know, while the annoying thing, while I'd been at my most infectious, I tested negative and I'd been everywhere. So,
right.
You know, it's probably very easy to get it.
So we do have a couple audience questions.
Yes.
The first one, Judy wanted to know, is it difficult to allow your amateur detectives to have babies? She loves that Georgie and Darcy are having a baby. And will Georgie still be able to do sleuthing with baby in tow?
Oh, that's such a good question. And it's so stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, why do I ever get them pregnant? You know, I mean, after the fact, when this baby's Molly Murphy, you know, finally she has a baby and she has to go to Paris, coincidentally. And of course, the moment I send her off to Paris, I realize how impossible this is because she's trying to sleuth and she has to go rushing back to feed this stupid child every few hours. It's like having a dog, you know, never give your characters a dog because you have to keep going back to feed it all the time and to walk it and to let it out. So I'm afraid, well, the one thing with Georgie is she can have a nanny. But as someone said to me the other night or texted me, do not let Queenie anywhere near that baby. So that, you know, that something in the future. But no, obviously, I think she and Darcy wanted children, so it was inevitable that they'd have one. But it is going to be a challenge. And she's not the sort of mother who wants to leave her child with the nanny the way she was left. She wants to be very hands-on with the child. So we'll have to see how she handles it.
One of the things I loved, Rhys, is that you didn't modernize you didn't make the book modern as far as Georgie's alcohol consumption, which I thought was wonderful. I would have been really irritated if she had said, oh, that's not healthy. I can't have anything to drink because I'm pregnant. Because they didn't in 1936.
You know, in those days, well, I think even in my childhood, if you were a little bit under the weather, they would fortify you with a glass of hot milk with brandy in it. And champagne's really, when I had my first child, my mother-in-law said, make sure you drink plenty of beer because it makes the milk come in. Yeah. So, you know, that's that. And the other thing, when my mother was expecting me in the middle of World War II, she was told, keep on with, make sure you smoke a lot to calm your nerves. So times have changed.
Yes. My mother smoked and drank cocktails.
And we turned out okay, I think.
We have another question. This one from S.C. Perkins, one of our favorite local authors here. So she was hi, Stephanie. She was wondering, very important question, scones, Devon way or Cornwall way? And let's start with you, Rhys.
Well, I spend my summers in Cornwall every year, and my sister-in-law married into one of the big famous Cornish families. And I am an absolute pariah because I like to put the cream on first and the jam on top. And in Cornwall, you're supposed to put the jam first and then the cream on top. So I'm afraid I do it the Devon way, even though I'm in Cornwall. And now I've said this in front of everybody. I'll probably never be able, they'll meet me at the Cornish border and say, "Get away from here, you hypocrite." So, but you know, I like to use it like a thick layer of butter. I like the cream to be the thick layer of butter, and then drop some jam on top. But no, that's not how you do it in Cornwall. How about you, Debs?
Well, I suppose I do it the Cornish way. So jam first, and then cream, and lots of cream.
Lots of cream, yeah.
Oh, I don't know. You know, either or. I can do it either way. I'm not fussy.
There is no right or wrong when it comes to jam and corn and clotted cream, you know.
Well, for what it's worth, I do it Rhys's way as well. So that's all we have. We have comments, you know, people who've enjoyed the talk. I do, before we go, want to make sure and give Deborah Crombie a chance to talk about her new book that's coming out in February. I always so appreciate people coming on as guest interviewers, and especially, you know, ones whose books we love as well. So why don't you tell us where we find your pair in February?
It's called A Killing of Innocence. I wish I had a cover to show you, but we don't actually have books yet. But I think the cover is fabulous, and it is set mostly in Bloomsbury and Soho. And it was a very frustrating experience because I had started this book in November of 2019, and when I was in London and expecting to come back in the spring and do more research, and we all know what happened. And so I spent a lot of time on Google Street View, and it was interesting. After a while, everything sort of started to blend together. I couldn't, you know, where I had really been and where I had only been on Google Street View. But Duncan gets a call to a stabbing in Russell Square, and Gemma is called in to consult a little bit because she is now working on a knife crime task force, and we go on from there.
All right. Well, we can't wait for it.
Yeah, set in November going into December. So it was great timing for me this trip, except the book is already the next one.
Perfect. Okay, well, I think that we're going to say congratulations to Rhys on a new book, on her 50th book. What a milestone. Congratulations. Keep them coming. I'm a big fan. Deb's a big fan. We all love them. So can't wait to see where Lady Georgie goes from here.
What else is in the pipeline, Rhys?
Well, you know, yeah, I mean, I've turned into a crazy woman because I was doing one of the Lady Georgies and one of the standalones each year. And then my daughter came to me a couple of years ago and said, "I would really like to write the Molly Murphy books with you." And I was a bit ambivalent because, you know, she's my daughter and I love her. And I thought, well, what if this doesn't work out? And I have to say sorry. But she was brilliant. From day one, she just picked up Molly's voice and she had great plot ideas. And so we're just finishing up our third book together. And the second one comes out next March. And it's called All That Is Hidden. And it's a story about a mayor's election, about Tammany Hall politics, corruption at the docks, a mayor's election in which Tammany Hall is running against William Randolph Hearst. So a lot of real history in this. And Molly finding herself dealing with rather corrupt New York high society. So fun one to write. But the one we're just finishing now.
I can't wait. And a standalone?
And the standalone is, we're a little bit behind on that. Normally, I think we would have had a time to say it's coming out. But my editors had what what the Queen would call anno horribilis. My editor has had her mother dying. She caught COVID quite badly. She just had surgery. So things have been pushed back a bit there. But I finished my part of it. And it's another book that takes place in Paris. A lot of it takes place in Paris before World War II, in World War II, and then after World War II, it takes place in Australia. And it's called Island of Lost Boys. It's a very intense book. It's probably the most intense book I've ever written, and I found it hard because, bad things happen, and you don't really want your characters to suffer too much. But my agent thinks it's the best thing I've done, so it'll be interesting to see when it comes out.
Oh wow! So when is this? When does it come out?
I'm not sure. The one came out this year in August. Whether it will be August next year or whether it will be later than that, I don't have a date yet. So I'll let you know as soon as I do, and as soon as I've got since I've got any arcs, I'll send you one.
Sounds
I
wonderful.
can't wait.
Yeah, I'll be waiting for it too.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you both again, and thanks to all of our viewers. If you're interested in ordering the books, we have signed book plates for Rhys's new book, and as I mentioned before, fingers crossed that we'll have Deb in store in February. And signed copies of the new Duncan Kincaid and Gemma James novel. The link's in the comment to order and to find out more information about both authors. I think we've done our jobs here. Everyone have a good evening. Thank you again for being here.
Oh, thank you, McKenna. Thank you, Deb. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you both.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.